the NFL offseason has officially started, and the first report we are hearing is coming in from Mike Florio as the Las Vegas Raiders are eyeing Brian Flores to become their next head coach. My name is Patrick Seatman, and I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in to Vikings Now. But this is what Florio had to say, saying there is a rumor currently making the rounds that once Brady rolls up his sleeves, he'll make the case for bringing in Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores. As the chatter goes, Flores would be the head coach, and former Giants coach Brian Daboll would be the offensive coordinator. Like Flores, Daboll has extensive experience with the Patriot Way. Daboll was there for the first 3 Super Bowl wins of the Brady-Belichick era and for 2 of the second trio of championships. Brady and Flores are believed to have a good relationship. Flores was among those in Miami who wanted to bring Tampa to town to bring Brady to town after his time in Tampa. And, there is going to be a lot of reports out there of this team wanting to hire Brian Flores. Obviously, now we're getting the Raiders, buzz starting off Black Monday here in the NFL, but I'm sure the Titans will request to interview him. Maybe the Giants will as well. So there will be a lot of chatter around Brian Flores getting a head coaching looks, just like how there was last year. Now, my opinion, if I was another fan of another NFL team, I would seriously consider hiring Brian Flores. I think he is a great culture guy because we have seen this Vikings defense, the intensity they play with, the swagger they play with. They play for their coach on that side of the football, and obviously his scheme is absolutely sick. So we'll talk about this more, talk about also the Flores lawsuit against the NFL coming up here in just a second, but we are actually in a race here to 69,000 subscribers. Our Cleveland Browns channel, the Browns Report here at Chat Sports, is closing the gap. We have about a 250 subscriber lead right now. So if you guys have not already, hit that subscribe button today. Lock us in as your go-to Vikings YouTube channel. This will be a crazy offseason. Quarterback talk, Brian Flores talk, cut candidates. It's going to be hectic. So if you guys don't want to miss a thing and be the most informed fan you can be, hit that subscribe button today. Now, obviously, the biggest question mark with Flores getting another job is his lawsuit against the NFL. And this is what Florio had to say. Saying that said, the Brian Flores lawsuit blew up the revised plan to pair Brady with Sean Payton, an effort that resulted in a massive tampering punishment, including the loss of a first-round pick and a $1.5 million fine and a 6-week suspension of owner Stephen Ross. This was back in the Miami Dolphins days. But also, he continued to say the Flores lawsuit is still pending. For some teams, including those who are named defendants to the case, the Giants, Broncos, Texans, and Dolphins, that would be an issue. For a team like the Raiders, which has a history of against the league, it may not matter, especially after the manner in which someone saw fit to force out Coach John Gruden in 2021. From a coaching standpoint, Flores fits with the widespread trend of finding a coach who is the exact opposite of the last guy. Carroll is a rah-rah, player-friendly coach. Flores is no-nonsense and Belichickian. Now, this is not the first time Mike Florio, this short offseason or over the last month, has put a report out there that this team has a lot of interest in Brian Flores. I think this is the agent talking right now. I think Brian Flores' agent is tossing Mike Florio a bag just to raise his price because he understands Flores, his contract is now done with the Minnesota Vikings. I still believe this, Flores wants to remain in Minnesota. Why not raise that price up? Oh, we throw a report out there. The Cowboys are wanting to toss Flores a bag. Now the Raiders could be potentially throwing Flores a bag. And maybe this very well all could be true to some degree. But I think Florio putting this reports out there is coming from Flores' agent, trying to raise his price and make Flores the highest paid coordinator in NFL history. But as of we are filming right now, we have 4 head coach openings in the National Football League. We have the New York Giants, Tennessee Titans, Atlanta Falcons, and now, as of about 30 minutes ago, the Las Vegas Raiders. They officially fired Pete Carroll. Now, I can cross off the Atlanta Falcons here. I don't think they're going to go back to another defensive-minded head coach. They just fired Raheem Morris. I don't think they're going to go Brian Flores. I think the New York Giants have a chance. Tennessee Titans, I'm going to probably say no. I think they're going to go the offensive route with a young quarterback, Cam Ward. And you could say the same thing about the Giants as well. But also the Raiders, the only thing, if I had to have a counter argument to Florio here, is like the Raiders are going to draft Fernando Mendoza. Do you think, Brian Flores is the best head coach for a young quarterback, especially the falling out that he had with Tua? Now, maybe if you bring in, like he was saying, a Brian Daboll to help, mold that young quarterback, maybe it ends up not mattering. But right now, 4 head coach openings, and there could be potential 2 more, the Arizona Cardinals and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I would probably go 50-50 on each of these. 50% chance that Jonathan Gannon gets fired, 50% chance that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers fire Todd Bowles, but there could potentially be 6 head coach openings. And with not that good of a cycle, like you got names like now, I also forgot to mention the Cleveland Browns in that list as well. But a guy like Kevin Stefanski out there, Mike McCarthy, there could be potentially 7 head coach openings here. So, we'll wait and see what happens with Flores. But the Vikings defense this year, was absolutely fantastic. Like, the really only negative was them stopping the run. And, I think that was mainly teams, just being flat out scared to throw the ball against the Minnesota Vikings this year with how good their pass defense was. Teams were throwing the ball against the Vikings at the lowest rate in the entire NFL, but they ended up being top 7 in points per game, top 5 in yards per game, 3rd in yards per play, 4th red zone, 4th on third down, 2nd in red zone. Yes, 21st in rushing yards per game, but top 2 in pass yards per game, and ended up being 10th in takeaways per game. And I think that was only really negative. I think Vikings being 10th in takeaways per game. If you take out the Bengals and the Lions game, I didn't really feel like they did a great job of taking the football away this season, but I think when it's all said and done, in my prediction with this whole Brian Flores, saga going on right now, with the Raiders potentially wanting to hire him, the Cowboys could try the prime way. I think Flores will eventually return to the Minnesota Vikings, and he'll just end up becoming the highest paid coordinator in NFL history. Chip Kelly, he made that mark last season, getting $6 million per year. I think Flores understands his value. He knows his worth, and I think the Vikings will eventually cave, give him maybe $6.5, potentially up to $7 million per year to be the defensive coordinator, because if you're the Wilfs, you got to understand, this defense, it is Brian Flores' defense. All this success over the last couple of seasons, it is not because of the elite personnel you have. It's because of the elite defensive coordinator. And to win a Super Bowl in the National Football League, you need an elite defensive play caller, an elite offensive play caller, and the Vikings have that. So don't screw it up. Make him the highest paid defensive coordinator, and I think the Wolves would do just that. Now, if you guys want the Vikings to keep Brian Flores, just hit me with a skull down below in the comment section. Try to get the good vibes heading our way and just spam those skulls down below in the comment section. You know I do, and I'm sure a lot of you guys watching want Flores to stay in Minnesota. So hit me with those skulls down below. And then coming up here in just a second, we're going to be talking about another Brian Flores replacement. Has emerged actually from the Atlanta Falcons, and he's got a strong connection with Kevin O'Connell. So we'll be talking about that here in just a second. But before we do so, got to tell you guys about today's presenting sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. Whether you're starting a new routine during the new year, making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard. But in life and on Prize Picks, it always feels good to be right. With high pressure, playoff matchups every weekend, and elite hoops action almost every night, the action never stops, and Prize Picks lets you take control. And Prize Picks has a brand new feature out called Early Payouts. So if your player gets off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. So find your community on Prize Picks. They have a brand new social feeds feature where you can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups from winners with a single click. Copy lineups you like or use them as inspiration for your own picks. You can even follow Prize Picks partners like us and tail or fade our picks with just one click. So download the Prize Picks app today. Plug in that promo code CLNS. Get hooked up with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Shout out to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, so the next potential Brian Flores replacement has emerged, and it's actually Raheem Morris. He was let go by the Atlanta Falcons late last night, started off the head coach firing cycle that we see every year in the NFL. And I'll tell you what, if Flores does end up getting a head coaching job and the Raiders do actually end up pulling the trigger on him becoming their next head coach, it's a pretty high-end replacement. Like, yes, I still think there would be a fall-off because you were not going to replace Brian Flores. Like, his scheme is so unique. He is so dominant as a defensive coordinator. He has really had NFL offenses in a stranglehold over the last couple of years. But Raheem Morris is not that bad of a replacement. He would be at the top of my list in terms of potential Brian Flores replacements. And the Falcons' defense this year, about middle of the pack, and they don't have a lot of talent. Like, we have known the Falcons, they have been lacking in the edge department over the last, feels like decade at this point. Now, they spent 2 first-round picks on some edge rushers this past year, and they have gotten better production, but still, with some shaky secondary play, with not a lot of talent at the linebacker position, I do feel like Raheem Morris has done a good job. I mean, about top 20 in all of these categories except for rush yards per game. So he would be a decent replacement if Flo ends up leaving. And I think Kevin O'Connell, he would be able to get him to Minnesota. Like, he would follow in the same bill of Brian Flores. Didn't work out as a head coach. All right, just come back and be a defensive coordinator. You know that side of the football. You can just focus on that. So I think Raheem would do a good job because KOC was offensive coordinator while Raheem Morris was the defensive coordinator when they won the Super Bowl under Sean McVay back in the 2021 season. So I'm sure both those guys, they have a good connection. I'm sure they would love to, potentially go and try to win a Super Bowl together and do it again. So that would be a solid choice. But and I say all that to say this, there's no replacing Brian Flores. If the Vikings do end up losing him, and I think Raheem Morris would be a fine replacement, it would still be a catastrophic loss. I don't care who you get. It doesn't matter what defensive coach you bring in here. The fall off to Brian Flores and whoever is going to be brought in is going to be extreme. Because also a lot of these players on the Vikings defense are already talking about the personnel level not being, you know, A plus in the NFL, but a lot of these guys are specific scheme fits for Flores. Van Ginkel's a scheme fit for Flores. A guy like Josh Metellus is definitely a Brian Flores guy. We would see their play drop off a little bit with Flores would leave. So I would definitely still be concerned no matter who the Vikings hire. But again, you got some replacements out there. Like you got a guy like Al Harris, DB coach for the Chicago Bears. He was great back when he was a DB coach with the Dallas Cowboys as well. Jonathan Gann, if he ends up getting let go. Jim Schwartz, I'm assuming the Browns would just get rid of that entire staff and completely start new, so he could be an option. Jim Leonard helping out with the Denver Broncos. He's a smart defensive mind. But again, no disrespect to any of these guys. They're not Brian Flores. So hopefully the Wolves, they cough up this money. They don't mess this up. And they just make the right decision. Give him $7 million a year. But again, if he gets a head coaching job, there's really nothing you can do. So hopefully this ends up working out for the Vikes because that Flores-Kevin O'Connell combo, even though it didn't work out this season, I still think it's elite. I still think both those guys are good enough to get the Vikings eventually to the promised land. But you guys let me know your thoughts. Do you trust the Vikings brass this offseason? Give me a Y for yes. Give me an N for no. I kind of trust them. We'll see what happens. I mean, the Vikings still went 9-8 with, the worst or second worst quarterback play in the league, and I think the coaching staff gets a lot of credit for that, mainly Brian Flores. Like, this defense was absolutely fantastic this season. So we'll be live later today on the channel, so make sure you guys tune in then, and we'll get on out of here. As always, let's go Vikes.